Welcome to the 56th session of the IPCC and 14th session of Working Group 3. My name is Hwasong Lee, the IPCC Chair. I would like to invite Dr. Abdallah Maqsid, IPCC Secretary, to moderate this opening ceremony of this session. Dr. Maqsid, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear Hwasong. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, excellencies, welcome. It's a great pleasure for me to moderate the opening ceremony for 56th session of IPCC and the 14th session of Working Group 3 of the IPCC. I wish to thank all delegates who joined us today. Our host, the government of the United Kingdom, the IPCC scientists, and all IPCC colleagues and friends. I would also like to welcome the media and the public following us today. I also wish to express my gratitude to the United Nations Environment Programme, the World Meteorological Organization, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for all the support provided to IPCC. The final product of this meeting is expected by the whole world. The next IPCC report on climate change and mitigation. This report follows the report on physical science basis we published in August 2021, and the one on climate change, risk, adaptation, and vulnerability that we have just launched this February. It is also comes before the final sensitivities report of IPCC. This report we expect later this year. With this report, we will conclude the sixth assessment report of the IPCC, the most intense cycle of the IPCC history. I am honored to turn now to our chair of IPCC, Professor Hwasong Lee, to address you. Dear Hwasong, you have the floor.
Thank you, Abdallah. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, excellencies, on behalf of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I'd like to welcome government delegations, representatives of observer organizations, IPCC authors, and Bureau members for the opening ceremony of this plenary. I also welcome the media representatives and the general public joining us today for this opening. We are very delighted to welcome today our distinguished colleagues and friends, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Terry Tallis, United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Head of UN Environment Program, New York office, Ms. Lizia Norona, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Patricia Espinosa, and Minister for Energy, Clean Growth, and Climate Change of the United Kingdom, Greg Hands. As the chair of the IPCC, I also wish to express our special gratitude to the government of the United Kingdom for their generous support and facilitation of this virtual approval session, the only option available due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is our third virtual approval session. Preparing for a virtual approval process requires enormous additional effort to address contingencies by the Secretariat, the TSU, and the Bureau members. We thank you for all that effort. Today, we are embarking on the approval of Working Group 3 contribution, assessing the mitigation of climate change. The next few years will be crucial for the state of climate change in this century. This is why an updated assessment of mitigation is more important than ever. The critically important Working Group 3 contribution assesses progress made in mitigation and options available for the future and enabling conditions. It considers these elements from the aspects of the technological, environmental, economic, and social dimensions, building on previous IPCC assessments. The context is sustainable development. The IPCC assessment so far made it very clear that human-induced climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying. It is a threat to our well-being and all other species. It is a threat to the health of our entire planet. Any further delay in global action will not be an option. The Working Group 3 report we have today sheds light on solutions to meet this challenge by providing us with the latest scientific findings of mitigation of climate change. I would like to acknowledge here the leadership and dedication of the Working Group 3 co-chairs, Dr. James Gee and Dr. Pridadish Shukla, and the Working Group 3 Bureau. Their guidance and vision led the work of the team comprising 278 authors from 65 countries to this outstanding outcome. This approval session marks the completion of trilogy. It is the last piece of the working group contributions to the AR6. Before the 3 contributions, the IPCC in this cycle produced 3 special reports and 1 methodology report. Such workload was unprecedented in the IPCC history. And the 3 working group assessments were conducted mostly in the years of the pandemic, but without disruption, despite the enormous burden on the assessment teams. The dedication and commitment of the IPCC authors made this possible. We thank you for your trust in the IPCC. The concluding part of the AR6 will be the synthesis report, which will be presented to you this September for approval and acceptance. It will be the concluding chapter of the cycle, synthesizing evidence and data from the 3 working group contributions, as well as from the 3 IPCC's special report. We will return to the usual in-person IPCC session in September for approval of the synthesis report. We look forward to returning to normalcy. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, our agenda for the coming fortnight is demanding, but I am confident that our joint efforts for careful, the line-by-line scrutinization of the summary for policymakers will ultimately yield a document scientifically robust and policy relevant, which we will be all proud of. As the chair of the IPCC, I urge everyone to uphold respectful, collegial, and collaborative spirit throughout this approval session. Only by working together, we can deliver this report to the world. I now declare the 56th session of the IPCC and the 14th session of Working Group 3 open. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Chair. Today, we are honored to have with us several distinguished speakers. First, I will thank the 2 parent organizations of IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization and the United Environment Program. Thank you for your continuous and ever stronger support to the IPCC. I am pleased to invite the United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Head of United Nations Environment Program, of New York, Mrs. Lydia Norona. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm pleased to deliver the statement on behalf of Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environmental Programme. Professor Ho-Shang Lee, IPCC Chair, Ms. Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary, UNFCCC, distinguished delegates, IPCC authors and experts, the media. I'm very pleased and honored to address you today at the 56th session of the IPCC and the 14th session of the Working Group 3. For 33 years, IPCC has underpinned global climate action. Now, with the finalization of the Working Group 3 report, the IPCC is on track to complete the current assessment cycle. This is key to ensure that the IPCC provides us with the science we need to inform the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement and support countries in increasing climate ambition. This success comes despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. I congratulate you for your flexibility, commitment, and dedication. I commend all key contributors to the Working Group 3 report, specifically the 278 authors of the Working Group 3 for the services they have lent to the world. Working Group 3 co-chairs and vice chairs Jim Scare and Priyadarshi Shukla for their leadership in the successful completion of the Working Group 3 report. The chair of IPCC, Ho-Shang Lee, for his support to the co-chairs, Working Group 3 Bureau and authors. The IPCC Secretariat under the leadership of Abdallah Mokshit for preparing a virtual session that is inclusive, fair, transparent, equal, and acceptable to all delegates. The government of the UK for hosting the technical support unit and the Working Group 3 approval session. The Working Group 3 technical support unit for their backing to the Working Group 3 team and excellent collaboration arranging the session. And the WMO for their support to the IPCC process, including the preparations of this event. Friends, the earlier reports from Working Group 1 and Working Group 2 on the physical science basis and impacts, adaptation, vulnerabilities highlight the importance of Working Group 3's work looking at mitigation progress and options. Your earlier reports showed that the world is already 1.1 degrees warmer and will reach 1.5 in around a decade. This warming has already caused dangerous and widespread disruption in nature. It has affected the billions of people. Every small increase in warming beyond 1.5 will result in escalating losses and damages. But avoiding the worst impacts of climate change is possible if we reduce emissions quickly, build resilience, conserve ecosystems, and dramatically increase finance for transformative adaptation. Yes, progress in adaptation is too slow and uneven, but there are options in every region and every sector to adapt. In particular, nature offers untapped potential to reduce climate risk, deal with the causes of climate change, and improve people's lives while providing jobs and boosting economies. Against this backdrop, urgent accelerated action is required to adapt to climate change while making rapid, deep cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. The Working Group 3 report will be a valuable contribution to efforts to do just this, as it will provide us a progress report on efforts to limit global emissions and review available mitigation options across sectors and systems. As UNEP 2021 emissions gap report showed, assessments of global mitigation progress and pledges are critical for climate action. Because we know we are off track for 1.5 degrees centigrade, because we know we are facing catastrophe, the Working Group 3 report will let policymakers know about the many solutions and opportunities available to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement and ward off this catastrophe. You, the IPCC, and its many authors and collaborators have done your job. Now you need to approve this report and get it out there so that policymakers can do theirs. I wish you the very best of luck for these 2 week-long sessions and look forward to seeing the great positive impact your work will bring to the world. Thank you.
The Executive Secretary Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Mrs. Patricia Espinosa. Dear Patricia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to join all of you today. And let me start by also acknowledging and adding my voice to the words of appreciation of gratitude, also for the other reports, the other reports that the IPCC has already published, and the synthesis report that you are working on that will be extremely important for the process going forward. I have been really looking forward to hearing, to reading of all the findings of the hundreds of scientists that have gathered in order to put in place these reports. And I am extremely grateful. We have actually not received very good news, but this is absolutely needed so that within the process and countries at the national level can have the science that will guide them in the taking of decisions. And today, let me acknowledge the Working Group 3 and the invaluable contributions that they have been making to our knowledge about climate change and mitigation. We owe a continuing debt of gratitude for the expertise and guidance provided by the hundreds of researchers and reviewers from around the globe who have worked so diligently to provide us with the latest insights from climate science. For those of us involved in furthering global climate action, the implications are clear. Despite substantive accomplishments over the years, including the fruitful outcomes from COP26, we are still far off the trajectory of stabilizing global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. Ligia has just said, for example, that we will be reaching the 1.5 degrees in a decade, or we could be reaching the 1.5 degrees in a decade. And so the fact is that the emissions accumulate relentlessly and that mitigation efforts have not been equal to the task. Even ambition, if we take current commitments as our guide, is manifestly insufficient. Time is running out. Effective action is urgently needed. Our objectives were agreed by all parties in light of the scientific evidence to cut greenhouse gas emissions 45% by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. To get there, we need more ambitious nationally determined contributions and the long-term strategies from national governments. The figures that we had in Glasgow really make many people very pessimistic about our ability to be able to reach that goal. In Glasgow, as a result of that, parties were requested to review their NDCs annually in order to increase ambition and share information on their additional efforts. They are now accountable to each other with respect to progress and content. It is imperative that nations who have already submitted their plans go back to those NDCs and strategies to make them stronger, to increase and accelerate ambition. And to those who have yet to submit updated NDCs, they need to do so as soon as possible, setting the most ambitious goals possible. And here, of course, the G20 nations have a special role to play, since they account for roughly 80% of their world's emissions. Fundamental to preventing the worst effects of climate change is fulfilling previous financial promises to vulnerable nations. The 100 billion pledge was a firm commitment that has still not been met, and parties must make this a reality in 2022, this year. And this is not just about the 100 billion alone. We must initiate the process for defining the new global goal on finance as soon as possible. We all know that finance is critical, both public and private. National governments alone cannot be expected to provide all the resources, financial or otherwise, that the world requires to make the transition to a low carbon future. Non-state actors also have a crucial role to play. The comprehensive transformation we need to achieve must happen in every sector, in every area of activity. Through the Race to Zero and Race to Resilient campaigns, the UN Climate Change Secretariat is channeling efforts from many cities, regions, and businesses, large and small, towards our shared climate goals. Their commitment is essential, and we see support growing throughout civil society. All this work is important, but it is not enough. Colleagues, to say humanity stands at a crossroads is an understatement. The 2020s must be a decade of action. 8 years remain. Long-term plans are important and they are needed. But if global leaders, public and private, do not make progress and establish clear plans for climate action in the next 2 years, plans for 2050 may well be irrelevant. Our work is clearly cut out for us, but I believe that collectively we are up to the challenge. Let me close again by thanking both Working Group 3 and the IPCC as a whole, and those participating in the next 2 weeks of discussions. I thank you very much for your work. I look forward for the outcome of your deliberations. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Patricia. Now we will hear a video message by His Excellency, the Right Honorable Greg Hans, Minister of Energy, Clean Growth and Climate Change of the United Kingdom.
On behalf of the UK government, I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome all delegates to the IPCC AR6 Working Group 3 Approval Plenary on the Mitigation of Climate Change. The IPCC process has been a force for good in the global fight against climate change, and it is an honour for the UK to be hosting this approval session. I'd like to begin, however, by recognising the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in. As the UN Secretary-General stated recently, Russia's recent attack on Ukraine conflicts directly with the United Nations Charter. The use of force by one country against another is the repudiation of the principles that every country has committed to uphold. The UN General Assembly has been clear in condemning this. We underline this as part of our commitment to international cooperation, including to address climate change and pursue sustainable development. Climate change represents one of the greatest threats to humanity of our age. It has never been more important to cooperate on climate change, reaching across the divide to integrate science and policy whilst guided by the best available evidence. That is why we are here today. This has been the most ambitious cycle in IPCC history. We have seen a phenomenal effort, firstly from hundreds of scientists from all parts of the world who have come together to ensure the best available science is accessible for all. Then there has been extraordinary cooperation between scientists and governments to produce these robust reports. Reports which lay out very starkly the choices facing the global community. They have already changed how the world thinks about climate change and influenced climate policy. As COP president, the UK is very proud that the IPCC Working Group 1 report was central to the negotiations and their outcomes at COP26. We hope this Working Group 3 report, along with the rest of the 6th assessment cycle, will play a similar role in achieving ambitious outcomes at COP27 in Egypt later this year and ensuring the global stocktake is informed by the best available evidence. In the face of the appalling consequences of climate change, it would be very easy for governments to simply sit back and wring their hands. However, the IPCC gives us the tangible collective steps we need to take in order to prevent the worst of our climate futures from becoming reality. Science has always been at the centre of international agreements on climate change. The timely approval of this report is therefore of paramount importance. The stakes have never been higher. The UK has and will continue to be a champion for the use of the latest science in driving climate policy. Domestically in the UK, we've produced our net zero strategy to keep us on track to meet our carbon budgets, in line with the most up-to-date science, as recommended by our expert advisors at the Climate Change Committee. We are also supporting climate efforts around the world with transformational action delivered through our £11.6 billion International Climate Finance Fund in over 120 countries. In these challenging times, hosting a successful international event is a monumental task. The UK is hugely privileged to be hosting the core team who will be instrumental in making this event a success. Along with India, we are proud to have co-hosted the Working Group 3 Technical Support Unit, and I'd also like to recognise the other invaluable contributions India has made to this report through its coordinating lead authors and hosting the second lead author meeting. I invite everyone to join me in thanking all those whose dedication makes this report and event possible. Not least the IPCC Secretariat, the Technical Support Unit, and the hundreds of IPCC authors who have time and effort to 3 contribution. I look forward to the successful approval of the Working Group 3 report so we can use the wealth of new understanding to shape our global response. Time is running out and we must all work together to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Thank you very much.